All right, you goddamn accursed, it's time for your favorite political podcast, Curse of Politics. Our motto, what we lack in profundity, we make up for in profanity. Joining me today, as they always do, are comms and strategy titans, Jenni Byrne and Scott Reid. On the pod this week, in the wake of Shannon Stubbs' allegations, what's really happening in O'Toole's caucus? Is this really about staff mistreatment, or is there some other thing going on here? And then we'll dive a little deeper into staff culture on the Hill. What's appropriate behavior and what's not, and how has it changed? We might have stories. The slow-starting Trudeau government has just issued a long list of cabinet committees and some really muddled mandates. What's the point of it all, and how does anything actually get done in Ottawa? We'll do our cursed clipping, Paul Wells, the future of the Liberal Party without Justin Trudeau. And finally, no curse of politics ever comes to an end without our hey yous for the week. Scott, Jenny, have you read my latest mandate letter for the pod? It's just 4 words. Be smart, swear decisively. And you guys are killing it.
They haven't released the mandate letters, have they?
They have not. No,
they still not
expect that before Christmas. It's too much to expect that before Christmas.
It's a lot of work, Scott. A lot of work.
It is. How are you, Jenny? I got to tell you, Jenny, that you can tell your dad that after the pilot, I went home and I started watching Yellowstone, and I blew through the whole thing. I'm caught up now. Now I have to wait like everybody else. It's amazing, that show. It's fantastic.
Isn't it great?
It's really great.
Who's your favorite character?
It's really great. Oh, God. Oh, probably Casey, I guess.
Oh, God. Of course you would like Casey. He's the most annoying character, except for his wife on that whole show.
Well, you're right, though. I'm coming around to understanding Beth, but she's a little hard to warm up to.
True.
I've not yet swallowed the Yellowstone pill. My mother's on my ass like your dad, Jenny, saying you got to watch. It's the best show ever. You know, it's like Falcon Crest with horses. I love it.
Well, I've got some time on my hands for binge watching because sports is over for me till at least next summer, till the CFL season starts again.
That was a rough Sunday. I was, man, it was there. It was there for the pickings.
Totally there. But and between that's over. They were good, and the Habs are still playing, but I don't know about that. Anyway, sports is over for me. Hey, Jenny, you're not in your studio, right? I've asked you. You have new artwork that I like. Will you show it to me next week? Will you show it to everybody next week?
I will. Yeah, I will try to have it up for next week. It's very exciting.
Yeah. You have new artwork today that I like. I like those pictures on the wall. I like those figures on the wall. Sort of resembles my backdrop. Very
Decided
cool.
to go a Marvel Comics theme. It's not mine, just so you know. I'm at my friend Lynette's, and this is her grandson's room. So when you guys were chit chatting about comics on Twitter last night, I thought, this is where I'm going to do the pod today.
Well, when we're done, I'd like to talk to her grandson a little bit because I'd put the Marvel characters on the left and the DC characters on the right, but that's just me. So.
Well, he's 5, so. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to talk to him. Boy needs some instruction.
DC ruins everything because if Superman exists, then what's the point of any other superhero? There's no other superheroes if Superman exists. Everybody else is just.
I like it when you
need the Flash. What do you need the Flash around for if you've got Superman?
Those Julie Schwartz stories from the 60s when he would push a planet. This planet's in the wrong place. I'll just move it over here. I'd be like, wouldn't he go through the planet? I would think about these things a lot when I was a kid. And then, they'd be like, his imaginary story where he marries Lori Lemeris, the Atlantean mermaid. He was he had a long-standing affair. Basically, had a long-standing affair with a mermaid, and nobody talks about this, but it's an important thing because his moral character isn't quite as flawless as people like to think. Superman.
All right. So, politics. So, you didn't get your mandate letter, Scott, but we did get cabinet committees. And it feels to me like, you go to these, your client organizes a retreat. And you go to these retreats and people are split up into breakout sessions to work things through. Well, it looks like they've taken the cabinet and they've broken it up into work into workout sessions because they took the whole cabinet pretty much and divided it up into two and put them on two separate cabinet committees with exactly the same job. And that job is a small job. That job is a small job. It is to consider such issues as sustainable and inclusive social and economic development, post-pandemic recovery, decarbonization, and the environment, as well as improving the health and quality of life of all Canadians. Well, first of all, what the fuck does cabinet do?
No, they've also been asked.
Cabinet do?
They've been asked to provide a definitive point of view on Stones versus Beatles, and that's going to occupy. The name of the cabinet committee is this: Economy, Inclusion, and Climate A. Economy, Inclusion, and Climate B. Now, do I sit around and say to myself, fuck, I got on B. I'm stuck on B.
How do I get into A?
Call the PMO and find out what I did to get on the shit list of the Bs. I want to be on the A team. Like, I don't understand this, man. It's just, what's the?
And they're not bothering to explain it. They're not bothering to explain it. So what the fuck is it?
But it's all gobbledygook. What is the equivalent of the P&P? Like, I don't know how we've touched on this.
I think it's ops, isn't it?
No, ops.
No, I think it's that communications and agenda one.
Yeah, but communications, communications, but Scott, ops is the communications. How we ran is you had P&P, which was chaired by the Prime Minister, and it was the heavy hitters. It was everything that happened in cabinet committee flew up. Anything that was in the lower committees ended up at P&P. P&P was the governing body, and that included the finance minister, the minister of foreign affairs. It was there. Sometimes it would, depending on the issue, would go to ops first, which was, of course, more of the communications and issues management committee, and then go to P&P, or sometimes P&P would knock it back. But P&P was ultimately the big committee, and we pretty much took our structure from how you guys ran things. So there wasn't much of a change in that. So, but I don't get the sense that agenda, results, and communications really means the same as priorities and planning. I also think regardless of the fact there are two cabinet committees on the economy, inclusion, and climate, there doesn't seem to be really a heavy emphasis on the economy, which is very strange because they waited long enough to set these committees. You would think they saw kind of where things were going in the world and where things were going in terms of Canada's economy, not just with inflation, but also considering one of their major priorities is, of course, is climate change and the transition from non-renewables. And that is going to, and I know, David, you spoke about it. I was listening to you the other day on another podcast, talked about that Canadians don't fully comprehend the gravity that it's going to be, the pain it's going to cause to actually do this transition if it's going to happen before 2050, which I don't believe it will. But if I'm sitting there, you would think that there would be some emphasis on that seriously. But these all seem, and then you have the Cabinet Committee on Safety, Security, and Emergencies. Like, so this just meets as needed. Like, why can't this fit into some other category? And I also like the name. Where is it here? Canada and the world. Well, all the other fucking committees are about Canada. The Foreign Affairs Committee is actually about the world. Like Canada and it's an oxymoron. So, anyways, I think the whole thing just seems ridiculous.
Well, people might be concerned if it was just named the world, that maybe it wouldn't include Canada. Perhaps it's a committee that meets to discuss our interactions with visitors from another solar system.
The post-Canada world. The post-Canada world.
Yes. But so you say, like, I think ops is their P&P. I think that agenda and measuring sticks and whatever, agenda, results, and communications, I think that's the one that first of all, I think it's a vestige of that numerology, what's it called again? What was that?
Deliverology.
Astrobiology, numerology, picking my assology, something like that, right? Like, anyway, I don't know what ever happened to all that. That just seemed, they just had that guy come and talk to cabinet committees every once in a while. But when
they delivered, it was over.
Fuck, man. What more do you want? We had our last meeting and we agreed. Signed, sealed, and delivered, baby. But you talk about cabinet committees. Under Chrétien, there was a comms subcommittee that was created, and it was chaired by Alfonso Galliano, who most people wouldn't remember because there was never any controversy surrounding his name, of course, but he would chair this cabinet committee on communications. So if you were doing any advertising in the government of Canada with public dollar, then you'd have to come and present to it. So what's your overall strategic brief? Why are you doing this? And then show the creative, right? And I can remember going in there when I was at finance, and I hated it. Like, it was so uncomfortable because two things would happen. First, of course, Galliano, for reasons traditional and maybe more nefarious, as we came to learn, would be basically like, why aren't there more people from Montreal in this room? Why aren't you from Montreal? And why aren't the three people I want to be working on this presenting? But then the second thing is it would turn into a focus group on creative, right? And they're the worst people in the world to do the focus group on the creative, like just terrible, right? And there was no amount of minutia or broad strategic direction that escaped their mandate. So they were like, I don't think we should be talking about this. We should be doing that. That guy shouldn't be a guy. He should be a woman. This woman shouldn't be a woman. He should be an elk. It would be awful. And I hated those things, and it would just make it terrible. So we ran our comm stuff when we would do advertising stuff. First of all, I tried to keep it off the agenda as much as possible. But if we did subject it to that gruesomeness, because ministers insisted, we'd put it through the ops committee.
You guys changed that, because when we did advertising, when there was an advertising plan, it went through ops for us as well.
Yeah. But we didn't have economy, inclusion, climate A, or economy, inclusion, and climate B. And,
we didn't either.
What could possibly not?
None of us can figure out why that is. None of us can figure out why they've set up that committee structure like that with those two. And they don't, and they must have known that nobody would understand that. And they don't feel any compunction to explain to anybody why they've done that.
Like, cabinet committees are important. They do so much underbrush. Like, you can live as a minister.
They run the government. Like,
no question.
It's not just that they're important. They run the government. Like, I don't know how you guys, our cabinet as a whole did not meet very often. Our cabinet committees met all the time. The prime minister chaired priorities and planning. It was a 5-hour weekly meeting. Like, these are not just throwaway things. Like, these are not just, these are extremely, extremely important, mechanisms of government.
Well, just for people that are listening, and haven't been involved at the center of a government, the cabinet committees are where you as ministers
bragging? Are you
would
like,
go to
what are you bragging?
If you don't swing a hammer like Scott fucking Reid, lean in and listen up, folks. I've been on cabinet committees. I sat at that little desk in the corner of the room, right there, having my thoughts and words recorded by the people behind the glass. I'm not trying to brag, Dave. I'm not trying to brag. But I can't deny the pinnacles of power to which I have climbed. But cabinet committees are where, as a minister, right, you can drop the ball, where your whole portfolio can get lost on you, because you can go into a cabinet committee unprepared, not having done your homework, not having made certain you've lined up your colleagues, not ensuring that you've managed to either co-opt or sideline PCO who might come in there, right, with steak knives looking to murder your initiatives, right? And that's, cabinet committees are where careers go to die, actually, for cabinet ministers, because that's where their initiatives will get strangled in the crib. And like you say, Jenny, often our experience, our Paul liked, a kind of a, what we call a SEMO style, discussion, and a wide open discussion. And so a full cabinet would meet and they would discuss, but it wouldn't be debating the finer points of a specific initiative. You would just end up having almost a fundamental political discussion on stuff, right? And the sort of agenda, does this proceed, does this not proceed? That would happen at a cabinet committee. But I don't know how a cabinet committee on economy, inclusion, climate A produces something that the whole cabinet, and what happens if economy, inclusion, and climate A considers an item that economy, inclusion, and climate B disagrees with? Like, is it the Jets and the Sharks? Do they meet in full cabinet with like switchblades? Like, how does it work?
It doesn't work unless there's a thinking behind it they haven't explained to us. Herle Burleyites, in the last couple of weeks, we've talked about gaming the system and bilking. And now we're staying on topic with a word we've heard all too often recently, rigging. To manipulate or control, usually by deceptive means, to fix in advance for a desired result. Right now, in rural communities across Canada, a few billionaire-controlled regional cable companies are not using government spectrum subsidies to do what they're supposed to do, provide high-speed digital connectivity to the good people who live in these communities. Instead, they're manipulating public policy by knowingly turning it into an investment tool, rigging it. They take the subsidies offered by government and just sit on them, wait, and then wait some more, providing no service to rural communities, building no infrastructure to help them connect. Eventually, they resell the spectrum on the secondary market, making millions of dollars in profit. Meanwhile, rural, remote, and Indigenous communities suffer. High-speed connectivity is key to delivering proper health care and education. It helps businesses and farmers compete with the latest technology. Basic life stuff. Without it, people just leave. As a technology leader with a social purpose, this is not how our presenting sponsor TELUS does business. TELUS believes that if you say you're going to work with government and take their spectrum subsidies for rural Canada, then you have an obligation, a responsibility to provide that service to rural Canada, to invest in those communities by building out connectivity infrastructure. And if you don't use your spectrum, you should lose it. To that point, right now, TELUS could boost service and quality of life to over 250,000 households in Alberta and BC if spectrum that was being held for profit by others was simply unlocked. Go to telus.com/connectingcanada to learn more. All right. You know, we have a section on this show called Clippings, and our clipping today comes to us courtesy of Paul Wells at Maclean's Magazine. Paul used to hate me for agitating for a Liberal leader to go, and now he's taken my place. In this piece, he raises 3 questions.
That's not the only reason he hated you. I can tell you there were many reasons he hated you. But that was
everybody has their own.
I think some of them might have had to do with a couple of parties. But anyway.
He raises 3 questions. The first question is, will Trudeau resign voluntarily? Boring! Not likely. If he leaves, the party's in bad shape for the coming election. Secondly, can those who want to replace him wait until he announces his departure to start organizing? Wells says the answer to that is no, and he says we taught him that. And third, is Chrystia Freeland inevitable? So, Jenny, while Scott tries to condense his 40-minute answer into something like 5 or 10,
lots of rocks.
What's your take on all that?
Well, we touched on it, but not in great detail before, about what does the party look like after Trudeau. He has changed how government functions. He has changed how party structure, how you deal with caucus, different than anything that we've been involved with both federally and provincially. And it works for him because he's Trudeau. People are willing to give him in caucus. They're willing to, I'll say it for your benefit, Scott, they're willing to have him not speak to them, know their name, wave to them in the hall. And, I think they're one of ours. They're willing to do that because he still remains the number one asset to the Liberal Party. We've seen this in the last 2 elections when, people at points they felt the campaign was near dead, and he drags them back up. To use Iggy, rise up, and they end up winning. So it's actually a very interesting question in terms of, can another leader sustain that? Because no other leader that comes next will have the unicorn power, will have the celebrity power that Trudeau has. But anyone coming up, if it's internal, if it is Freeland who is inevitable, and I don't think that it is. Although I do think it seems that's what Trudeau would like. So in terms of, she doesn't even have to start organizing. The organization is already there. It's all happening for her. She's his heir apparent. So she doesn't have to kind of do traditionally, as in, I got to go and win this fucking riding a DSM, or I've got to make sure this happens. It's just happening for her organically. For her experience in government is going to be watching how Trudeau ran government. And I think depending on how things go, it's going to be a pretty rude awakening, whether it's her or whether it's someone else, that this is actually not how things go. And I doubt that in the future, regardless of the political stripes, they will run this way again.
Right. That's good. Scott?
So, I mean, first of all, I'm on the record, and I'll repeat this, that I think all this speculation about Trudeau stepping down, like his article actually begins with the premise that he would step down this year, that he might not see the end of 2022. That startled even me. I was like, really? Wow. I didn't even think that was going to, I guess technically next year or whatever, but that he would be leaving that soon. So I continue to assert that I don't believe that Justin Trudeau is going to find satisfaction doing something different from what he's doing now. The kind of satisfaction he gets from being prime minister, being at the head of the being in front of the microphone, being at the head of government, I don't know that that's easily replaceable, and therefore I don't think that he will seek an alternative. But some days you look at his behavior.
Okay, so let's just take the hypothetical, and let's just say the next couple of years go badly for the government, and he's very unpopular and decides to go in the way that Mulroney decided to go and his father decided to go. Or
he decides he does, or he defies us and he decides that he does. And the government's ticking along where it is. It's living along at 33 and he decides he wants to pack it in. So here's the most interesting thing then about Wells's piece, which it starts to scratch at the surface of what I think is a really interesting question. And it's an awkward, verboten question in many ways, as Paul himself mentions in Ottawa. And that is, he says, can anyone beat Freeland? I would pose it differently. Can anyone compete against her? Can anyone even enter the race against her? Like, I think, one of the interesting things is that the dynamic is this is so clearly Trudeau's party. It's not the Liberal Party as an institution that we knew for decades, right? This was a recreated political movement and institution under his name, brought back from the ashes, and it exists wholly at his ready. And so, if organizationally, culturally, all of those things, the overriding thesis is, one of the great bequests that the Trudeau time can give us is a first female prime minister, or the, Kim Campbell short-lived. But if, their notion is that we'll have a prime minister who is a woman who can take power and
elected.
That's right, and
elected
succeed in getting elected in power. There will be a tremendous amount of cultural pressure to say, we've long thought she was the most competent and most capable minister. She's the right hand of the prime minister. And why would we dare to walk away from this opportunity to give the party this female leader, this female prime minister, someone that might sustain themselves past the duration of Kim Campbell and win an election? And I think that's going to make it almost impolitic for another male cabinet minister, for example, to say, I think I'm going to run. Like, I think almost the first question you'll get inside the cultural institution that is the Liberal Party under Trudeau will be, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing, man? Like, are you trying to deny us this opportunity to have this first sustaining female prime minister? So it will immediately, I think there's almost kind of this pressure that says, sorry, right? Like, it's impolitic to even contemplate that. So I do think it makes organizing awkward. And then it begs the question of, well, how good is she? Because there are tons and tons and tons of people who are great at having dinner at BECTA and managing those cabinet committees that we were talking about earlier, and coordinating officials and political staff and managing all those interests that are Ottawa, that don't necessarily have the toolkit to get elected and to win elections. And, Trudeau's a guy who, for all the reasons you mentioned, Jenny, he can pull a party behind him. He can strap that sleigh to his back and carry the party through general elections. And, we don't know that Chrystia Freeland has that talent. We don't know that she has that toolkit. And I would argue that we've not seen those tools and those talents on display. We know she's an extraordinarily competent and capable minister, but we don't know if she's a talented politician. We really don't. Not the kind of politician that can lead the show. Now, and that's a test that any potential leader has to face. But this assumption that she is the choice and ought to be the choice, it's going to have to, at some point, if it does actually start to unfold, she's going to have to right-size expectations and meet the expectations that come. And the expectations of her as somebody who's, the best minister.
There won't be any time to find out whether she's good or not, though, because leadership races when you're in government are short.
Yeah.
And that means that delegate selection meetings and membership cutoffs are very quick after the prime minister resigns. So there's not going to be a long time to find out whether she's got the goods or not. It's going to be, it could all happen very, very quickly. You've raised a lot of interesting points, both of you. The third one that I would add to it is, does a leadership change cement Trudeau's imprimatur of taking the Liberal Party and making it a left of center movement? Or does the new leader bring it back to what it was before, which is a center-left brokerage party? I think that's going to be really interesting to see, and I think that could be one of the undertones of the leadership itself.
Well, if it's Freeland, like if it's Freeland, I think we're going to see. I think we'll probably see more of the same in the direction that Trudeau has taken the party. But as I said before, Freeland is not Trudeau, and so I think that and if, let's say, it's all happening, whether it's 2022 or whether let's say it's 3 years from now, if they're still in government, they will also be a long in the tooth government. They will be a government that at that point, if we're looking, they're going to be in their late teens in terms of how long that they've been in government. And so she could even be the best potential prime minister or political figure. She will also be the leader of a party that has been in government for potentially 3, maybe 4 successive elections.
You know, I think, David.
Well, that's the reality of taking over in government, is that when you take over, it's because the party is likely headed toward defeat, right? So all these short-lived prime ministers, Campbell, Turner, these kind of people, you can't, they always take the accountability, but the defeat was generally salted long before they got there.
Agreed.
I'm not sure. I think your point you raise is really interesting, David, but I'm not certain that a leadership race will actually illuminate that question and the question of where the party will sit in the political spectrum, because I don't know that the party will admit to itself in the course of a leadership debate, particularly one that's dominated by a frontrunner like Freeland. If all this happens, we're just jerking off. This is such speculation, right? But any of that, I'm not certain that the party's going to have.
It's a podcast. What are we supposed to do? Jesus.
No. It's very factual, very, very factual stuff. But I don't think that the party's going to say, well, we want to talk about how left or how right we are. I think the party will use that time. It'll sustain its self-image. It'll just perpetuate the message of we're all centrists and we are in the middle and all that sort of stuff. And so I don't know that the question will get illuminated. I think the underlying question will be, do we think, will they fall into being a technocratically led government, right? Are we going to become the party of Ottawa, the technocrats, right? So that's what, and we'll present ourselves as that, as opposed to, a more popular, and I'm not necessarily even saying populist, but a more popular ability to connect with people and populations government. I mean, the problem with being in government for stretches of time is you start to confuse those technocratic skills with political skills. And yeah, it's small p politics to navigate and, manage your way through those knife fights that are senior public servants, the cabinet committees, staffing, all that sort of stuff. It's enormously political, but it's not the same thing as standing in front of.
We don't have anybody even
say, I am fucking jacked up about you.
We don't have anybody that would be even in the speculation list that would meet the Chris Arnauty test for political leadership. Of somebody that comes off like a normal, regular Joe to the back row.
I think that's interesting. Yeah, and none of them do. Even outsiders like Carney doesn't. It's not like people go, oh yeah, he's going to be running as the prairie populist. No, it doesn't. And I think that's a real issue for the party because it starts to communicate what its critics try to say about it, and you want to be careful not to become what your critics say you are, right? Which is that it's, technocratic, it's downtown elites, it's, people who think they're smarter than everybody else, who finish their sentences by saying right, with the implication being, I am of course right, and you would be well advised to agree with me on account of me always being right. It's a real danger when you're in government to fall into that stuff.
So, Canada's megacity just keeps growing. I mean, intensification is barely an understatement. The area between Toronto and Hamilton is the most populous, dense, and voracious in the country. By that, I mean its demand for manufactured and consumer goods and raw materials is relentless, and most of those things arrive by train, resulting in lower GHG emissions and supporting our collective efforts to address climate change. Remember, one train takes hundreds of trucks off our highways. But trains have to be unloaded somewhere. Containers have to be transferred to trucks for the last mile of delivery. The fact is, existing transfer facilities in the greater Golden Horseshoe have been overloaded for years. So 6 years ago, CN formally proposed building a new transfer hub in Milton, southwest of Toronto. A multi-year environmental assessment followed, the most stringent of its kind in Canada. And thousands of consultations took place with concerned stakeholders, various levels of government, and First Nation communities. Plans were adjusted and readjusted. CN invested millions in local infrastructure, ceded land to local government, and committed to protecting wetlands and wildlife habitats. The new hub will be served in part by the new fleet of quiet electric trucks CN has commissioned, and the project is expected to contribute up to $230 million in new municipal revenues. Eventually, the government's assessment panel reported that CN had made a compelling case for the new terminal. The federal cabinet approved the project last January, imposing 325 conditions CN must meet, including limits on truck traffic in and out of the hub. And last month, the final regulatory bar was cleared. The Canadian Transportation Agency approved the Milton hub. Businesses that need strong supply chains cheered. To quote the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the Milton Logistics Hub will help facilitate the delivery of everything Canadians need to live and work. Construction will start soon, and CN will continue working with the community. Canada's busiest urban centre will be better served in the years ahead, and so will our environment. All right, Jenny. We're done with Trudeau now. Erin O'Toole has reported Shannon Stubbs to the House of Commons for bad behavior. And some bad-looking stuff was leaked out about her. What's going on here?
Well, I think one of the most base and easy accusations that people can make against a woman who is in politics or in the public eye is that she's a bitch. I'm sure I've been called much worse in my career in politics. But if any woman shows any form of aggression or wants to hold people to account, it is seen in a different light than what it is men. In some technical,
Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, both facing those kind of allegations down in the States. Yeah. And
so at the end of the day, just from a technical point of view, the House of Commons investigates things, my understanding, and the rules have changed in terms of the Board of Internal Economy since I was there. If there's an actual complaint, there has been no complaint against Shannon to the House of Commons. So Erin has gone to the House of Commons and asked for there to be an investigation. That doesn't mean there's going to be one. And obviously his office is the one that leaked the story to Bob Fife. It reads, we've all played the game. As soon as you read the headline and as soon as you read the quotes, you know that basically Erin didn't want to deal with caucus, so he decided to hand Bob Fife a caucus management
I've not played that
issue.
Game, and I object to the insinuation I've not played that game. Take that back.
And part of the reason it's not even covering their tracks. The two people named in the story, there's only two people that were willing to put their names to the story, and one of them was a Erin O'Toole organizer during the leadership race, thinks very high of himself. The other is a current party staffer, and we know that current party staffers do not speak out or do interviews with Bob Fife, of all people, the knife, if it is not sanctioned or agreed upon in terms of the central party. And in fact, the people
you do not wing that. You don't wing that.
You do not wing that. And in fact, one of the guys who claims to have worked for Stephen Harper and Ronna Ambrose, my first dealing with him was he was working on a nomination campaign against a friend of mine, and he's someone that's been reported in the press. He talked about that there should be no Jews or ethnics on Erin's leadership campaign in Quebec because Quebecers are racist. He referred to a Pakistani Muslim organizer on Aaron's team as, I think, a swamp thing. These were text messages that were reported in the press. My dealings with him is because I was my friend Jamie's nomination, and we were getting reports back from our door knockers on GOTV weekend that the information that the campaign that he was working on was saying a couple things. One, they were saying this is a good Christian riding. We should ensure that we nominate someone that believes in Christ. My friend Jamie is Jewish. She's also a young mother. And the other thing they were saying was, why would a woman want to leave her son or her husband and young son to go and work in Ottawa and do politics? And so this is the ugly side of politics. I'm fine for getting your elbows up, but this speaks to this whole issue. If you look at kind of the, I'd hate to say the word bullying. If you look at some of the three caucus issues right now that people are talking about internally, a bit externally in terms of Aaron and his management of caucus. You now have Shannon, who most people I speak to, both in the media and internally, think that it obviously looks like a hit job. Shannon is very well liked in caucus. She is someone that is very dedicated to the party. She joined at the age of 14 after seeing Deb Gray speak and sat in her riding association in Beaver River in Edmonton North when she was 14, 15 years old. The second problem is the Denise Batters issue. So Denise came out and has called for an early leadership review of Aaron, a referendum, not even to step down. You have another senator, Mike McDonald, who I quite like as well, who came out and said that he should actually step down and resign. Denise is out of caucus. Mike is still in caucus. And then let's talk about Leslyn Lewis. Leslyn Lewis is the first Black woman to run for a leadership position within our party. She actually came in first in raw votes on the second ballot of the leadership. She is a PhD and she is an Ontario MP now. And she is not in our shadow cabinet. That seems extreme, not in our shadow cabinet, not in our deputy shadow cabinet. So it seems extremely bizarre. So the mentality seems to be the
said deputy shadow cabinet with a straight face.
I had to practice saying that. But the fact of the matter is that the feeling it seems around Aaron's caucus management or lack thereof it is, the beatings will continue until the morale improves. And we all know that at the end of the day, caucus will hit a point where they will only take so much. And it doesn't actually mean that things are going well for him. So kind of in a nutshell, that is what I feel about where I think things are in terms of Aaron's caucus management to date.
So my take on it would be just from a distance and trying not to have any horse in the race of any kind. I look at it and I say, yeah, he leaked this out. I mean, no matter what she's guilty of, whatever it is, he knew about it a long time ago. So he chose this time to put it out and to deal with her. And all the examples you cite, he's cleaning house, isn't he? Like he's getting his house in order to support his leadership. He's using the tools he has at his disposal to organize things and to move people around to solidify his leadership. Isn't that smart?
But he can't. He can't remove her. So my guess is because of the Reform Act. We've talked about this. So my guess is that what Aaron is trying to do is come up with a way to circumvent the Reform Act, because the Reform Act, he would have to have the votes to get to remove Shannon from caucus. He does not have the votes. Shannon is not Derek Sloan in any stretch of the imagination. There is no way that caucus would vote to remove her. So I think Aaron is trying to find some way to remove her from caucus that circumvents the Reform Act. That actually, David, shows the opposite of a show of strength. That actually shows tremendous weakness. And to your point, why do it now? Shannon was critical of Aaron's the running of the campaign leading into the first caucus meeting, and since then, no one's really heard from Shannon. And so I'm not sure why he chose this weekend that he was going to resurface this when last week was probably one of the calmest weeks that he's internally had. I'm not sure why he just wouldn't come into this week and say, let's just get through another week, and have a calm week. And calm at this point in my leadership is a good week.
Well, first of all,
should Cretchen have done more of this stuff, Scott?
Yeah, I think to be honest with you. So I mean, Jenni threw a lot of fireballs there about what's going on behind the scenes, people, all that kind of stuff. But by and large, I sit back as a liberal and as not a fan. I go, hey, this is great. It's Boston Bruins versus the Philadelphia Flyers. If there's a way, I hope they all lose. It's fan-freaking-tastic. And so, you get these ugly spectacles. I think a couple of things. This is like one of my fundamental rules of life, which is that more than one thing can be true. It can be true that this is a hit job, which indisputably it is. And the reason we know it's a hit job isn't just that the story landed on Fife and all those kinds of things. It's that these complaints have predated for so long. And you mentioned this, David, right? So that's how you know that it's being marshaled for internal political purposes, right? But her conduct, looks like it's in question. So I just don't want to totally dismiss that. These are serious issues. So we can't be completely sanguine about that. So she's put herself obviously in a position, or she's in a position where he's able to act on this. How it unfolds, I don't know. But the fact that his motivation is questionable doesn't necessarily excuse her conduct. But the broader dynamic, to me, it seems, is that in all honesty, if I was working with him, I'd be trying to figure out a way to do some of this stuff. I'd be saying, look, we got to go carrot and stick. So, first thing, I'm going to create my shadow cabinet. I fucking hate that bullshit term. But I'm putting Pierre back into finance for sure, because I do not want that guy to be in a position where he's standing on the outside and therefore has all that martial power and authority and he can use it against me. So I'm putting him right where he wants to be. I'm giving him finance, and then I got him closer to me, and I want to. So that's a little bit of carrot, and I want to make certain that I can see the guy at all times. Second, I'm gonna take some of the people that took a public run at me, and I'm gonna put them to the side, and I'm gonna use powers. And I agree with you, Jenni. He doesn't have the usual authority and powers that a leader does. So he has to sort of, it's this kind of stuff. But I'd be saying to him, that we've got to, with measure, and all these things are judgment calls. We've got to demonstrate to people that, we've got some steel, that we've got some balls, and I frankly think that it makes sense if somebody's going to come out and say, you're a bad leader, you want not to survive, that you say, well, you know what, I'm going to have to take that on then. I can't be a doormat to that, knowing that I'm going to have to face this. Now, I would also counsel him to call the question, but, maybe the reality is he can't because he knows he'd lose. But I would be doing a little bit of carrot and stick, and so I'm not shocked to see the stick.
Jenni, you got anything you want to say about that?
No. Listen, if Aaron truly had power and authority in the party, as Scott said, he would call the question, and if he truly had command of the caucus, he would call the question to remove Shannon from caucus. But he doesn't. For ergo, he doesn't. So that's why.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Isn't something happening that? I don't know how to read the relative strength, and you would because you have a better sense behind the scenes. But I know that Denise Batters came out.
It's good of you to concede that.
Well, I should think. But Denise Batters came out and said that her letter would be the first of a series of actions that we would watch unfold. I assumed that would happen in relatively near time, but we haven't seen those actions unfold since then. So is the blend of carrot and stick that he's been using, is it possible to interpret that it's having some paralyzing effect? We haven't seen those other shoes drop.
Well, I guess we'll see. We'll see if they. I have no idea what those. I have no idea what those shoes are. I guess we'll see. I doubt we'll probably see anything into the new year. Everything's kind of shutting down. But who knows? Something could drop tomorrow. I have absolutely no idea. I'm just saying it remains what I've said before. Silence does not always equate to support.
Right. But sometimes the willingness of the subsequent phases of these kind of efforts are dependent upon the success of the first phase of it. And so when Keith Davey and Mark Lalonde and Jim Coots all came out against Turner in '86, there were supposed to be tons of people coming behind them. But when those three people went down in a hail of bullets, there was nobody behind them, and maybe nobody wanted to come behind Denise Batters.
There's a lot of John Wayne sitting around the bar, but then when it comes time to go over the top, Not the same.
Listen, caucus members, I've said this before. I'll end up by saying caucus members are like everyone else. People do things in their own self-interest. And at the end of the day, if they all plan on running again, they want to win their seats. And so we've seen 4 polls that have come out in the last 2 weeks. We've talked about this on pods. And we are down numerically in all of them nationally, in Ontario, in the prairies, since the election. And we should be 10 points up. The economy has taken a drubbing since September 20th. It's been 2.5 months.
The government's disappeared.
The government has disappeared. We should not have dropped anywhere between 8 and 4 points, depending on what national poll that you look at. So at the end of the day, I don't think anyone thinks that there's going to be an early election. I think everyone thinks that this is going to be a long minority. So we'll see how things progress. But as I said, people always do things generally based on their own self-interest.
Okay, now I want to move on, and I'm going to say something controversial here, and I want you two to react to it.
Awesome.
And I probably am not the one to say it, because I've actually never had one of these jobs of working for a staffer or working for a caucus member or a cabinet minister. You both have. So, leaving aside the painting allegation, I don't want to get into the allegations because I don't know what's true and what isn't true, but the painting allegation is out of the norm. But calls at night, yelling and screaming, demanding about things, getting yelled at when things aren't done properly or when things go wrong. This is the fucking job description of working for a politician, isn't it? This is what the job is. And this is everybody throughout my whole lifetime accepted that this is what the job is, and you either do it or don't do it. It comes with tremendous upsides. At a very young age, you're around big, important decisions that you maybe have no business being around. You're being exposed to things. You're going to have post-political career opportunities you would never have had. There's all kinds of upsides. But there are really shitty elements to doing it. A lot of them relate to the incredible stress that politicians are under. Some of it relates to the time constraints that they're under. So if you're told to get their dry cleaning, it's because they're fucking busy doing their job. And so, is there a culture change happening in Ottawa where people now think that these jobs should be 9 to 5 union rules regulated jobs that are normal? Because they aren't and they can't be.
Yeah, I agree. I can't tell you what's happening in Ottawa. I haven't been on the Hill for, 6 years in any capacity. But I don't think they can change. I'm with you, David. And by the way, if for all of the things that you just said in terms of what yelling or late night phone calls or late night emails, I do think there is a difference that people treat between men and women. I've been in lots of meetings where people have yelled, and I've seen a few things thrown. I've actually never seen a woman throw anything. I have seen a couple of my male colleagues throw things, and no one ever said a word. I remember in one meeting, a colleague of mine threw a stapler and walked out of the room. We all kind of looked at each other and shrugged and picked up our books and Blackberries, and we went on with life. I think there's a difference between, we're not talking obviously about sexual harassment or any of that bullying or that kind of stuff. But in terms of, to your point, David, in terms of getting dry cleaning or frustrations, my management style when I was in government is I'm not someone to sit and wait and say, okay, well, when Scott comes in tomorrow morning, I've got these 8 things that I want to talk to him about. If something comes to mind as I'm watching the news at 11:30, I'm like, fuck, I'm going to send Scott a note now. Because then I don't forget about it. Then I have that. So then it happens. Everyone has different management styles. And so I think that, and it's not just, I don't believe it's just politics. The other day I was watching that old movie, A Devil Wears Prada. I can't believe that that's not actually how different things, how different assistants work. You watch Succession and look at those executive assistants and what have you, but it's for the same thing. You're getting to rub shoulders. You're getting to learn from high-end business people. And so I hope there's not a culture shift, because otherwise it's actually going to make politicians' jobs harder. To your point, David, if you're a cabinet minister and you're, let's say doing the Friday sitting and you get out of the house at noon, and then if you're in a riding where you actually have to worry about it, you're getting on a plane, and then you're going to go and spend a day and a half going around your riding and doing constituency events. And then on Sunday afternoon, you're probably going to, kiss your spouse goodbye and wave at your kids, and you're going to go on a plane and you're going to redo it all over again. And so if part of the job description is grabbing someone lunch or picking up their dry cleaning, like I have friends that, used to pick up, on Fridays would pick up dogs from a kennel, and then on Monday mornings take them to the kennel. Like it's part of the job description to make your minister, your MP's life easier so they can do their job, get reelected, and then rehire you.
I'm reluctant to move into this world of sounding like the stereotypical grizzled old guy. Well, in my day, Paul Martin once pinned me between two transport trucks, cut off all the blood to my lower extremities, and I thanked him for it. I knew I'd be a better, sharper person for the experience. Thank you for what I learned, sir. And please hurl invective at me. So I don't want to be that guy.
You didn't have to ask. You didn't have to ask.
No, you did not have to say, could you raise your voice and throw some swear words in that sentence? Could you let me know whether I'm displeasing you? And I do think I want to make I just want to highlight something Jenni said, and one place where I hope the culture of the Hill has changed, and that is around abuse. And I'm telling you, abuse and harassment was rampant when I was there. I know it was there, and I know it was worse before I was there. I know that young female aides were subjected to constant pressure by members of parliament, by other staffers. It just was.
Cute young blonde male aides, Scott.
Well,
cute young blonde male aides were sometimes subjected.
I won't. I'm not going to turn this into a Kitty Kelly tale all, but for sure, I had a couple of older males when I was first on the Hill try to play grab ass, and that's and you're feeling sick to your stomach, and when you're a 200-pound guy, that's a whole other experience than when you're a 105-pound woman. So it just whoa. So that stuff persisted on the Hill for a long time in a way it seemed to me to be disproportionate to other professions. And so I do hope that stuff's been bled out, and it needs to be. But beyond that, the stuff we're talking about, right? The expectation I shouldn't have to receive texts late at night. I shouldn't have to be working around the clock. That is the job. That's the role. And, you can enter jobs where, you're not on the Hill. I get this. I just got an email last night from a friend. His son is thinking about, working in politics. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And why? Because it's a meritocracy. Because if you're one of the two real gamers in that staff of 12, then you will get exposed to incredible things. You will get experience with media, with policy, with issues. You will be given the seniority and opportunity to contribute in a way that you won't anywhere else at that age. And it's an enormous opportunity. The consequence is you're going to have to work around the clock. And you can't complain about, well, you know what? My other friends aren't having to take texts at 7 p.m. That's part and parcel of it. And you know what? I used to make liquor store runs and dry cleaning runs and all that shit. Not for Paul, but for others when I was younger, all kinds of stuff. And that is part of it.
And you can choose to do it or not to do it. If you choose that you're more into the millennial 9-to-5 work-life balance, and you work on the Hill for a year, you can choose to leave, or you can be like us. Like for me, I liked it. So so what? I'd be Christmas shopping at 6:00 on, December 23rd. And it would be urgent issue back at the PMO. And you're I'm throwing bags at my sister and going, okay, well, I gotta go.
I found it wicked stimulating. I loved it. Exactly. I felt like I was at the center.
There's only a few jobs like it in the country. You don't have to take one.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's that time of the show. Mr. Pinsent is agitating for us to get to our hey yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The hey yous are about to begin.
Who wants to start?
I'll start because I might make Jenni's head burst. My hey you is a call out to O'Toole in his office, and I thought they handled something with unique skill. I may be attributing too much credit to them, but I thought that conversion therapy bill, which the Liberals introduced, clearly to jam the gears of the Conservatives and screw up their caucus and get all that dynamic back out and revived. I thought the idea of saying we'll keep people that may have concerns about this out of the Commons that day. We'll therefore have a group of people who are committed to this. We can give universal consent. We can do that. And once we do that, then if it goes through all stages, then we don't have to revisit the issue, and we don't have to have debates, and we don't have to have arguments about it. And then none of those members who are uncomfortable with it get exposed and get put on profile. And we just get this thing done within a tight few minutes. I thought that was a really deft management of that. And again, I'm assuming that that was the conscious decision that they made in terms of who was there, who wasn't, how they played their hand on that. And I thought that that was skillful. That thing could have turned into a multi-weeks long problem that exposed them to internal and external grief. And I thought that they did a good job of diffusing that grenade.
Why would my head explode on that? I agree with you.
Oh, I just thought you'd be like, don't fucking, that's not what happened. That goddamn O'Toole couldn't piss in a straight line.
No, my head's not splitting. I agree with you. My hey you is to the Liberal government in this entire nightmare that seems to be the new COVID hotels. We went through the first year of the pandemic, and then they were added around Christmas, and they turned out to be a colossal failure. And now with this Omicron variant, which I cannot pronounce, which seems to be very mild, thank God, and seems to be, as of 2 days ago, the WHO had said there were no deaths based on it. Hospitalizations kind of in South Africa, where the first case was detected on November 23rd, are low. And all of a sudden now the government is instituting these very draconian COVID hotels where people aren't being fed. You're not even allowed, like in the first round, you're allowed to kind of, I guess, order Uber Eats, and people could bring food. You're not allowed to do any of that. So people are sitting, there was one couple who were totally, and by the way, double vaxxed, 2 young kids sitting in a hotel room, like hours between, getting fed. And so I don't know where the public policy thinking on this. It's very lazy. It's like, okay, we're going to knee jerk and do, someone check and see what the best practices should have been in March of 2020, and let's bring that document out. And so for all the fact that they've got all these cabinet committees, including the one on emergency preparedness and emergent, whatever it's called, I'm shocked that we're there. And these are horrifying stories coming out of these hotels. So I think the government needs to kind of go back to the drawing board, because these are not working. And even the WHO has come out against Canada's current new COVID policies around this new variant.
So you'd resubmit this to economy, inclusion, and climate B or A?
I don't know. I think it might be.
Clearly not A.
I think it might be an A. I disagree with you guys. I think it might be A.
Well, all right.
I think send it to both. Send it to both. That's how we'll get the best decision making out of this. My hey you goes out to a good friend of the Herle Burley pod, Ontario Financial Accountability Officer Peter Weltman. Peter's in the news this morning, having released a study about the vulnerability of Ontario's infrastructure to climate-related events, talking about the fact that we are going to need in Ontario for the government to spend about $10 billion a year to shore up critical infrastructure. Incredibly timely after the events in BC. And I think this is a really important contribution to the discussion around climate. And we need to start thinking about the effects that are already certain and baked in that we're going to have to deal with while we fight against the encroachment of further climate change itself. So, Peter, great contribution, and you're overdue for the pod. Come back on. All right, everybody. That's our show for today. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsor, CN Rail. I want to thank Scott and Jenny. You were in rare form today. Top notch, both of you. Top notch. Thanks to our listeners and viewers out there, the great mass of accursed. And we will see you all next week. More politics, more Scott, more Jenny. Take care. See you then.